3 scary true stories from people who were home alone. The first story was shared by someone who still lives in the same house where it happened, though they say it has never felt truly safe since that night. I was 19 at the time and living alone for the first time. My parents had moved out of state for work, and instead of selling the house right away, they let me stay behind while I finished college. The house was old, built sometime in the late 1970s, and it sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac. During the day, it felt normal. At night, it felt much larger than it actually was. That evening, I was completely alone. No roommates, no pets. My parents were hundreds of miles away. I remember checking all the doors before going to bed, like I always did, making sure everything was locked. I even checked the garage door twice. By the time I finally went upstairs, it was a little after midnight. I was lying in bed, lights off, scrolling through my phone, when I heard a sound from downstairs. It was subtle at first, a dull thump, like something heavy being set down. I froze and listened. The house creaked sometimes, especially at night, so I told myself it was probably nothing. Maybe the air kicking on, maybe the wood settling. Then I heard it again. This time, it sounded like footsteps, not the random popping or cracking of the house, but slow, deliberate steps moving across the living room floor. My heart started pounding, and I held my breath, straining to hear more. The footsteps stopped, and for a moment, the house was silent again. I grabbed my phone and texted a friend, asking if they were still awake. No response. I considered calling my parents, but the thought of explaining why I was scared of some noises made me feel stupid. I stayed in bed, barely moving, listening. A few minutes passed, and I started to calm down. Just as I was convincing myself I had imagined it, I heard a soft clicking sound. It took me a second to recognize it. Someone was trying the handle on the back door. I felt a wave of panic rush through me. That door was directly below my bedroom. I could picture it perfectly, the way the handle would turn slightly before stopping because it was locked. The clicking happened again, slower this time, like whoever was down there was being careful. I slid out of bed and locked my bedroom door as quietly as I could. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. I stood there in the dark, listening as the handle downstairs stopped moving. Then I heard footsteps again. This time, they were heading toward the staircase. Each step on the stairs creaked loudly, the sound traveling straight up through the house. Whoever it was wasn't trying to be quiet anymore. They were climbing slowly, one step at a time, as if they knew exactly where I was. I backed away from the door and crouched next to my bed, holding my phone to my chest. I didn't want to make a sound. The footsteps stopped outside my bedroom. I could see the faint shadow of someone standing on the other side of the door, blocking the light from the hallway nightlight. The doorknob began to turn. It moved slowly at first, then harder, rattling when it didn't open. I bit my hand to keep from making any noise. After a few seconds, the rattling stopped. There was a long pause, so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. Then the person knocked, 3 slow knocks, right on my bedroom door. I don't remember deciding to call the police. I just remember my fingers moving on the screen. I whispered to the dispatcher, trying not to cry as I told her someone was inside my house. She told me officers were on the way and to stay on the line. The knocking didn't happen again. Instead, I heard footsteps retreating, moving back down the stairs, then across the living room. A moment later, the back door slammed shut. The police arrived less than 10 minutes later. They searched the house and didn't find anyone. Nothing was stolen. There were no signs of forced entry. The only thing they noticed was that one of the downstairs windows had been unlocked. I never figured out how long it had been that way, or how long someone might have been inside my house before I heard them. I slept with my bedroom door locked every night after that. Even now, years later, when I'm home alone, I can't sleep without checking the stairs. The second story comes from someone who lived in a small apartment building and learned just how close danger can be without you realizing it. I had the night off and planned to enjoy having the apartment to myself. My roommate was visiting family, and I was looking forward to a quiet evening. By the time the movie ended, it was close to 1 in the morning. I turned off the TV and sat there for a moment, enjoying the silence. That's when I heard a noise from the hallway outside my apartment. It sounded like someone dragging something heavy across the floor. At first, I thought it was a neighbor moving furniture, or maybe someone taking out a trash. The sound stopped right outside my door. I waited, listening. Then I heard a faint scratching sound, like something brushing against the doorframe. I stood up slowly and walked toward the door, careful not to make any noise. I leaned forward and looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. I felt embarrassed for getting worked up over nothing and stepped back. As I turned away, I heard the sound again, this time louder, scratching right against the door. It sounded deliberate. I looked through the peephole again, and this time I saw movement. Someone was crouched low, just below the peephole's view. All I could see was the top of their head, dark hair pressed close to the door. My stomach dropped. I backed away and quietly locked the deadbolt. The scratching stopped immediately. For a few seconds, there was nothing. Then I heard breathing. It was faint but unmistakable, coming from just outside the door. The breathing slowly turned into soft whispering. I couldn't make out the words, but it sounded like someone talking to themselves. I stood frozen in my living room, unsure what to do. My phone was in my hand, but I was afraid that even the sound of dialing might give me away. The whispering stopped, replaced by a light tapping on the door. Not knocking, tapping, like someone running their fingernails across the wood. I finally called the police and hid in my bathroom, locking the door behind me. I could still hear movement in the hallway, footsteps pacing back and forth. By the time the police arrived, the hallway was empty. They reviewed security footage later that night. The footage showed a man lingering in the hallway for nearly 20 minutes. He tried the handle on several doors before stopping at mine. He crouched there for a long time, listening. When the deadbolt locked, he stood up suddenly, like he realized someone was awake inside. They never found him. After that night, I moved out as soon as my lease ended. I still live in apartments, but I never ignore noises in the hallway anymore. The final story was sent in by someone who experienced something far more subtle and far more disturbing while home alone in the middle of the night. I was in my late 20s and living in a small one-story house by myself. It was a quiet neighborhood, mostly older couples and families. That night, I had fallen asleep on the couch while watching TV. I woke up suddenly, disoriented, and checked the time. It was just after midnight. The TV was still on, playing quietly. As I sat up, I noticed something was off. The front door, which I always locked before going to bed, was slightly open. At first, I thought maybe I had forgotten to lock it. I stood up and walked toward it, feeling uneasy. Before I reached the door, I heard a noise from the kitchen. It sounded like a cabinet opening. I stopped where I was and listened. A drawer slid shut. Very slowly, my heart started racing. I quietly backed away, trying not to make a sound. I grabbed my phone from the coffee table and ducked into the hallway, hiding in the bathroom. I locked the door and turned off the light. From where I was, I could hear everything. Footsteps moved across the kitchen floor, then into the living room. Whoever it was didn't rush. They moved calmly, confidently, like they had done this before. I heard the couch creak as someone sat down. They were sitting on the couch I had been sleeping on minutes earlier. I covered my mouth with my hand, terrified that they could hear me breathing. The TV volume was turned down, then turned off completely. The sudden silence made everything feel worse. The footsteps resumed, moving down the hallway. They stopped right outside the bathroom door. I could see the shadow of someone standing there, inches away. The handle moved slightly but didn't turn. After a long pause, the person stepped away. I heard them walk back toward the front door. A moment later, it opened and closed softly. I stayed locked in the bathroom until morning. When I finally worked up the courage to leave, I found muddy footprints on the kitchen floor and a half-empty glass of water sitting on the counter. Nothing was stolen. The police told me there was no sign of forced entry. To this day, I don't know how long that person had been inside my house before I woke up. What scares me the most isn't that someone broke in while I was home alone. It's that they took their time, as if they knew they could.